the doctor's office and wondered why it was that we usually end up spending around 30 to 40 minutes in the waiting room and then end up getting around maybe 10 minutes of actual face-to-face contact and communication with our doctor? Well, I've noticed that. And I came to learn that it's one of the many side effects of the fact that America is one of the only first world nations to have a for-profit medical system. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things for us as the patients under this medical system in America, but it means a lot of things, specifically conflict of interests for our doctors when it comes to this system. So, for example, many pharmaceutical representatives in America can legally work with doctors and provide them or offer them incentives to recommend their drugs or their medications to the doctor's patients. Now, I don't know about you, but that in and of itself is a textbook example of conflict of interest. But obviously, not every single doctor is going to be working with a pharmaceutical representative, but although many do. We can also look at hospitals. Now, many health administrators will rank their doctors and rate them based off of the quantity of patients that they see, rather than the quality of care that they give. And this can leave a lot of different negative ripple effects that end up affecting us as the patients. So this leaves a lot less time for doctors to really sit with their patients and explain to them why it is that they want to prescribe one medication over another and how that medication reacts with their body specifically. Not only that, but it leaves very little time for these doctors to sit and communicate with their patients and figure out why it was that they might have gotten this illness, if it had to do with lifestyle choices and so on. But if you think about it, with these for-profit hospitals, it's kind of smart in that their patients end up also being their customers. Now, while I was talking about how this ends up bringing up more negative ripple effects, one of them is the fact that we spend over $300 billion a year on pharmaceuticals alone in America. Now, that number is not only more than any other country on this planet, but it's more than every other country on this planet spending on pharmaceuticals combined. Now, if we want to work to combat this issue, obviously there needs to be a lot of different types of policy change and reform on not only a state, but a national level. But the question that I want to present to you guys today is, what can we as students do to combat this issue? Or can we at all? Or is it too complicated to even combat? Well, to begin with, I'd like to show you a chart. And it is a chart of the top 10 killers in America as of 2013. Now, if you watch TED Talks, you might recognize this chart as one of my role models, Jamie Oliver, used it to perfectly illustrate one of his points when he stood on a TED Talk stage. But for tonight, let's go ahead and look at the top 2 killers in America. Now, they consist of heart disease and cancer. And something that I want to point out to you is one of the main common factors that they have, that they share between one another, is the fact that they are both considered preventable diseases. Now, obviously, there is so many different types of genetic variation and different types of deformities that end up leading to many people who have no control over ending up getting these heart disease and cancer and so on. But for many of the cases, they can be considered to be preventable. And I think that that fact in and of itself can be something that we can look to as motivation. And I'll explain why. But to start off, or to go into a little bit about myself, I'm a nutrition and dietetics major. And I remember when I first entered college as a freshman, I really wanted to join a club. And I remember going to the club fair and looking for something to join. And I remember one group that really stood out to me was the anti-drunk driving groups on campus. And they mainly consisted of college students that would protest for policy change and that would spread awareness on how to avoid drunk driving. Now, obviously, you could avoid drunk driving by not drinking, but on top of that, more specifically, they would spread awareness on how much you should drink in comparison to your body weight and how to appoint a DD and what that is as a designated driver. And I remember looking at them and thinking, how beautiful that a community of students saw a problem on campus and they decided to come together to work to prevent that problem from happening again. And bringing it back to present day, I'd like to make a connection with that and some of these top killers and ask you, what would happen if we used the same mindset, the same creativity, collaboration that they were using to fight anti-drunk driving, to fight drunk driving, and put it towards some of the top killers that we have in our country, what would we see? What if we decided to start promoting advocacy groups that would educate people on the fact that our diet is one of the main factors that ends up determining whether or not we get diabetes, whether or not we get cardiovascular disease, and even cancer? What if we started groups that even provided incentives for some of their members to come out and work out in the park together and make it a group activity and a community endeavor? What would we see? Well, to paint a picture for you, I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of our neighbors overseas. Now, women in the Netherlands ride their bicycles everywhere. And when I mean everywhere, I don't just mean riding their bicycles on a Friday or Saturday morning or riding their bicycles with their kids. I mean riding their bikes to get from point A to point B. So they'll ride their bikes from their job to the grocery store, from their home to their friend's house, and so on. And funny enough, many scientists have found a connection with lower rates of obesity in countries that have higher rates of active transportation. And a perfect example of that is riding bicycles. Then let's also go over to China. Now, if you went to China and you went to any given large park, you will more than likely run into a countless amount of people who are doing different types of exercises throughout the park as a group, individually, and so on. And they're not just lifting weights or they're just doing squats. You'll see people that are in groups doing different dance moves to different genres of music. You'll see people that are doing anything from yoga to Tai Chi to different types of Chinese versions of what we consider hacky sack. And what's so awesome about this is that in this country, it's something that is socially acceptable. It's something that when you walk through the park, it's just something that's a part of their life. And in doing that, they're also maintaining their health. Now, given all this information, I remember when I was telling my friends that I was going to come up and do a TED Talk or a TEDx speech, giving them all this information, I remember two main things that they told me. Now, the first one was, but Alina, the whole topic of your speech is on taking money out of medicine, taking away the conflict of interest with doctors. What about that? What about the pharmaceuticals? How are you connecting that with people in the park doing dance moves? And to that I say, when it comes to that massive $300 billion yearly bill that we spend on pharmaceuticals, how much of that money do you think is going towards the top killers in America? And when we look at these top killers in America, looking at cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and we look at what causes them a lot of the time, they end up being a product of an accumulation of small lifestyle changes that we ended up making over time that led us either to take a step towards health or a step away from it. And so I want to make that connection with you guys on how significant that we are as a student body if we decide to make that connection and advocate for better health. Now, the second thing that a lot of my friends told me when I told them that I was going to talk about this subject was, but Alina, student organizations and clubs on campus already fight the top killers in America. They already raise money and do fundraisers to fund different types of cancer research. What about all of that money? And to that I say, the concept that we live in a society where one of the main and oftentimes only way that an individual will pay attention to and try and fight something that is significantly plaguing our nation on such a large way is just throwing money at it, which is still very important. For that to be the only action that we mainly do in our society and then go home and surround ourselves with the same things and consume the same things that we have knowledge on that have been linked with causing many of these deaths. That to me is like going to church every Sunday and paying a tithing and thinking that that one and only action is what's going to get us into heaven. Now obviously, many religions are a lot more intricate than that, and so is our health, and so is our medical system. And so, given this information, what I want to leave with you guys today is that if we really want to combat this massive issue that we see in our country, we can empower ourselves by not just looking outside of ourselves to politicians, not just looking outside of ourselves to our health industry and the reform, but also looking around at each other and as a community, as students. And I really, truly believe that if we come together as a community to combat this, we can dare to take money out of medicine.